One thing on our agenda tonight, and that's to talk about budgets. There's no action needed, nothing that's going to be done. For the record, we have Linda Schofield on the phone. Hi, Linda, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. I'd like to essentially thank everybody for sitting through this a few times and understanding what's in here. I don't know that there's a lot we want to do tonight. I know that we didn't talk about CNR at the last meeting, and I know Linda had some comments on CNR that she wanted to share with the group, and I don't know if there's anybody else that's looked at the CNR and wants to address anything on that, but this might be a good time to do that. Linda, would you like to jump in?
Sure. Let me clear there. I apologize for all the background noise as well. One here, so it was really noisy, and my mute button is a little gimmicky. Anyway, I did want to express some concerns about one item in particular on CNR, and that's the purchase of the body cameras. I did a little research on those myself and learned that they are believed to be effective in reducing police brutality and also reducing frivolous citizen complaints. But fortunately, we don't have either of those problems here in Simsbury. I did talk with the chief about that, and he did confirm that we really haven't had incidents of either in the past. Really only about 25% of the municipalities nationwide have adopted these cameras, and those are really the urban areas that have gone in that direction. And their experience has been one in which they're pretty overwhelmed with the cost for operations on an ongoing basis. So that's my big concern, is not only is this an expense as an initial purchase, but that you're baking in an ongoing operating cost for training the staff, for the staff to daily download and cataloging of data, the cost for archiving the footage that's from the cameras. There are also increases in costs for SOI requests, so that footage can be shared with people. And in fact, a lot of the police departments that have adopted cameras have had to hire additional staff in order to handle all of these things. So I'm thrilled to say we have a wonderful police department that doesn't have these problems that are addressed by cameras, and I think that contributes to our chief and to our officers and to their community-based approach to policing. And, you know, I think we have to remember that we have to look at capital expenses and this sort of thing, not just in the context of is it good for the police or not, but what are the competing demands. And as we look forward in the coming few years, we know we're going into a very, very tight situation with a lot of revenue from the Hartford, and we have competing demands. The Parks and Rec Department, the DPW, the engineering department, I think they would all say they're short-staffed. And I think we have to recognize that we build in operating expenses to maintain cameras that are meant to solve a problem that we don't have, then we are not solving problems that we know we do have because we're needing to spend money on other things. So again, I want to applaud our chief and our police officers for fostering a really positive relationship with the public, and thank them for their professionalism and their commitment to community policing. And make note that we're not Ferguson, thank heaven, and we don't have that kind of problem to solve. So I would submit, and I know we're not voting today, but I would submit that we should eliminate the expense for body cameras. I do have two other comments about capital, but let me shut up and see if somebody wants to jump in on this topic.
So we don't have to yell at you, Lynn?
Is there anyone that would like to address that issue first?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
one question about it, and I
Yes.
guess it would be to the chief since he's here. Does the body camera inclusion in the budget, does that have something to do with, anything to do with the accreditation? And will it not having it, would it jeopardize accreditation going forward? Okay.
Did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it would appear to be a solution without a problem. And given the tight constraints that we have with our 7% cap and other needs, I'm not saying it wouldn't be, a great to have, on top of all the other wonderful amenities that we'd like to have, but we have a limited budget. The future costs that Linda alluded to should not be ignored. The operating costs, just for your information, costs alone, I can tell you, working in a public institution, that those costs are enormous, and the town already does a great job at, open and transparent communications. But when you begin looking at body cameras, for example, that's yet another cost that you need to include. And I think Linda mentioned in her commentary that many towns that have gone this route have had to hire an additional FTE just to accommodate the increased operating costs, including FOI requests associated with body cameras.
May I ask the Board of Selectmen, Lisa, can you address the incremental cost? That's something we're always concerned when we approve things, that we understand the operating impact.
Sure. The chief did prepare a memo on the impact on operating costs, and not all of them are known at this point, but I do want to pass that out for you. And Sean, I guess, can you please email that to Linda? This came to us at the request of the chief of police and the police commission. The recommendation was made, and I'll let the chief speak to this as well, was made because they're in anticipation of a state mandate where these will be required. The representations made to the Board of Selectmen were that they wanted to get ahead of the mandates that are coming down the line, to work on establishing a policy. It'll take about 8 months to a year to do that. They use it from their perspective, as they described it to the Board of Selectmen. They felt that it was helpful in training police officers to wear the body cameras. They're also helpful in terms of reducing exposure to police officers if there is a false accusation made. We are very fortunate to have an excellent police force with a great reputation. So the danger is not there that they're abusing their power, but that they may be falsely accused. So that was part of the recommendation that was represented to us. Again, Police Commission is the commission assigned to deal with these issues. I think they're unanimous consent, and the police spoke in favor of it. Chief, do you want to speak to this at all?
I think the memo that you have in front of you is specific in detail of what the future is going to be. And that's unpredictable. I can't tell you that down the road, I'm not going to be looking for an employee to work on this project. Depends on how much volume and taping we have to go through, and allowing the courts to have access to this information as well. So right now, it's the figure, and I think one of the figures is 6,000 just alone for a license to run it. Next year, it'll be changing again. It always, as you all know, it always goes up. It never goes down. So.
And does anyone have the ability to estimate the storage requirements? Is it physical storage, or is it just all computer capacity that we're looking at?
It's computer capacity. We have a system now that takes care of the cameras that we have in the cars. That would have to be increased to take care of the body mics and cameras, which is in the report that you have.
And we have the capacity in-house already to maintain this level of additional information?
No, part of the request for the cameras is for more storage in order to comply.
Okay.
So we are short on storage.
So someone mentioned mandate. There is not a mandate.
It's anticipated the mandate will be coming down the pipe probably by next year.
Can I jump in on that?
from the state of Connecticut. It's kind of an unknown type of situation, but in my circles, the emphasis is it will come down to mandate within a year or so.
Barb, can I jump in?
Yes, go ahead.
I think, I understand that the mandate may come, and at the point at which it comes, it may come with funding. Sometimes that happens, not always, but sometimes. And if you've already done it, you won't get that funding. But, I would say when the mandate comes, obviously we have to comply. But if we don't have a mandate, we don't have to do it. And anticipating the mandate, I don't see, and I'm sorry I can't hear very well, so I made this comment that the chief made, but I don't see that it gives us an advantage to come in early, prior to the mandate.
So I'll just I'll give you my opinion. I agree with Linda on this, that this is, it's interesting. I don't think we really understand the problem that it solves or when the mandate will come. I think we would have time to do this. I'm not hearing overwhelming need. So I would say, given a tight budget, I'd be inclined to agree with Linda on this one. Wait for the mandate.
How much is this capital project?
60,000.
60. So it's a $10,000 impact in next year's budget, 12? Does that fund the rest of the person we didn't fully fund?
Oh, from last
Have you taken, at our last
20,000?
meeting, we requested that between Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen, they identify funds for that. Has that been done?
Yes.
Who's funding, where's it?
No way.
Anybody want to share?
We used to have a saying, it's in there, you find it.
So basically, the OPEB information was what we were
We
waiting
can
for Sean.
allow it to reduce the overall budget.
What I think she was saying is when OPEB came in lower, we were going to ask you to cut by whatever it came in lower by.
So we don't have a specific final number, but we got enough information on our conference call for me to say that yes, we can contribute 20,000, and that's what Matt and I had been speaking about. Matt and Lisa and Matt and I, so we advised the Board of Ed of that yesterday evening once that information came. So that's what we're intending to do.
So I think what Linda was suggesting, because I know we talked about it before, is we should be cutting the budget for the fact that we over budgeted OPEB, not using that money to fund a resource that we didn't fully fund. That's all. I mean, to the extent we over budgeted a line item and we now know it, we can cut that line item. That's not the same as
Taking out.
taking something out to find the funding for the rest of this position.
I guess I'm confused as to what I heard at the last Board of Finance meeting. I must be missing something.
I thought you said you two had to find the budget room in the current budgets, correct, to fund that position.
Yeah, and I think the conversation was when OPEB came in, we would be adjusting for the actual OPEB. They were two separate conversations. Right.
That's correct.
So,
I'm not sure what you're asking.
So the
Can I make
OPEB cannot be used, well, it
Shouldn't be.
shouldn't be, wasn't intended to be used to fund the position. That the board was waiting for the hard OPEB numbers to come in to,
So you're looking for a reduction in the budget?
To match the $20,000 partial salary for that position.
So we were looking at, and what we discussed was a continuation of the shared services concept that we do for IT and for parks and for school resource centers. So I'm confused why we wouldn't be contributing on the Board of Ed budget.
you're welcome to contribute. It's just that when we budget a hard spot because we don't have a number yet, and then we get a number, using that hard spot, which you don't need that money anyhow, and I assume you wouldn't be spending it, is not cutting it out of the budget, because we would have probably pushed back to ask you to cut that anyhow. That's all. Next year, we need to get our pension and OPEB numbers earlier, and I know there were unusual circumstances this year that caused it to be so late, but when we create a hard spot with that, that's sort of found money in the budget.
And
So-
I think there's some additional information that Tom and Sean and I would feel that we have to share with your finance and requirements of committee, because we don't have final numbers to hand you. So I just was confident that we had conservative enough numbers to what I thought was resolve this issue.
And I think that's acceptable. That's consistent with what I listened, I wasn't at the meeting, but I listened to the whole tape. That's consistent with what I thought we heard. But what I think we're saying is that can't just be that we got into OPEB numbers and they're lower than what we had budgeted. That's not the same thing to me, is it? It's saying you're gonna take up the $20,000 slack, Burke, somewhere else among things that are already budgeted in your budget. And so copiers cut $10,000 to get, and someplace else cut 10,000. That's what I thought you guys, we had, I thought that was the message that was sent back. Is that consistent with, no?
I didn't put the two conversations together, and I
Right.
thought
Sounds like
that
it.
based on past history, we have used savings, like last year with the insurance savings to offset the budget. I mean, I can see both sides, that's not what I understood.
It's definite, it wasn't clear at the last
Yeah.
meeting.
How
That-
much
that
is the
much-
OPEB below the,
We don't have a final number, which
Oh,
again,
okay.
I believe is part of a further conversation, because there's some assumptions built into that.
When will we have the final numbers?
I mean, if we were speaking with Becky Silman on, what was it, that was on?
It was yesterday.
That was actually yesterday.
It was yesterday. Long day.
It was a long day.
It was at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think she indicated within the next, I believe, a couple of weeks, we could have the final number, but it wasn't. As Burke said, there
So we
was
should take
indications
this
we
up
should
as a
have
report.
X, Y, and Z, but it wasn't to the end. But it was.
We're saying, I think what we're trying to say is we agree that OPEB is worthy of further detailed conversation, but for the purposes of what I heard at that meeting, which I was asked to speak to, was we don't want to have a new assistant engineer position that's not fully funded so that we have a hit to the budget in next year.
That's exactly, I was gonna say, I was about to ask, because everybody was clear that was the whole message, is, I think everybody gets that.
I'm surprised that we didn't hit what I thought you were.
Yeah, I thought, I agree with Burke that I thought,
But
at
at
least
least
with
what the
the
budget
goal, the flat mill rate, we were getting caught with the mill rate conversation, but if the impact is to cut the 20,000 above and beyond, that OPEB savings for next budget, that is gonna bring our mill rate lower by a fraction of a mill, but it would, you know what I mean, it wouldn't be keeping it flat with the same budget appropriations.
Right.
Maybe that's just two different ways of saying the same thing.
I just wanted to thank again SCTV because it made possible our ability to participate, to listen, and
Right.
they did a great job. I mean, I was able to, certain things I wasn't able to see, but I think it's more my eyesight, but I was able to hear everybody. Great job.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of why the actuarial analysis is taking so long? They have all the data they need and it is.
We were delayed in getting it to them this year due to extenuating circumstances.
Oh, okay.
That should not be there again next year.
Okay, great.
Is that fair?
That's very fair.
Okay.
All right, so, do we need to do anything relative to Linda's proposal and, my.
Regarding the CNR?
CNR cameras.
If we were to cut the CNR cameras, it reduces the Board of Selectmen budget by 12,000, which,
Does the budget have
That's
the
how we jump to this other
$6,000
topic.
I'm sorry, does the budget have the $6,000 maintenance in it for the first year, or is that included in the first year? Or is that,
Chief, can you answer that question?
The $6,000 license fee included in the $60,000 capital acquisition in the first year? Let me back up. You said it was about $6,000 of license fees ongoing. Is that included in the $60,000? All right, so, and is there one charged in the first year or just in the subsequent years?
Charged
Following year. All right. Well, to me, this is an issue. It's less about the $12,000 than it is about this capital appropriation, which we're recommending. You guys have recommended to us, and then we have to approve. So.
But the vote wouldn't come tonight anyway.
Right.
It would come.
And can I jump in again?
Yes, go ahead, Linda.
I think I heard Peter say that the estimate of $6,000 in future years is for the licensing fees. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So there was nothing budgeted for training costs or for the staff time it takes to upload data. In fact, I read that some of the other police forces, the officers complained that in their usual 8-hour shifts, now they had to knock off earlier because they had to take the time to do all this uploading, and that, meant there were fewer people on the beat. So that affected staffing. There were expenses, as I said, for archiving, although I think I heard Peter say that they had plans to do this in-house, but also expenses for data retrieval, for responding to FOI requests. So if I'm hearing correctly, none of that was budgeted for ongoing operating expenses. The only operating expense budgeted was the licensing fee. Is that correct?
The only budget is for this year.
I'm sorry, for this year.
This year, and the 6,000 would be only beginning in year 2.
They would be budgeting that for the subsequent years in those budgets.
So we're looking at another 50% increase just for that alone in the appropriation.
And that would be up to the department to find where to put that. Right?
So within your budget, you can do the training and the rest of the stuff without any other additions?
Yes, the storage that Linda's talking about, we have an officer already assigned for storage in the computer of the cameras out on the cruisers. We're going to continue that. We have no idea if that's going to be enough, but we already have people attending to that job. It depends on how swamped we get as the years go by.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing. So I think I heard you just say you have no idea if the $6,000 will be enough?
No.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, really hard to hear.
Okay. Well, I said in the future, if the licensing fee, as in any other thing that you purchase, always increases, it never goes down. So my assumption would be, down the road, that $6,000 for licensing will increase per year.
Okay.
But that at this point, he identifies no other incremental costs associated with the program. He
Other
can,
than what's in the.
Other than what's in the request, the 60,000.
Yeah, the memo doesn't quantify. I think that's only because, in fairness to the chief, he doesn't really know how to quantify. This is, and we've read about other towns that have had the body cameras, purchased and have given up already. And so, again, there's not a mandate. If there were a mandate to be implemented, it could be over a 2 or 3 or 5 year phase-in period for towns. You're looking at an additional 6,000 next year. You're looking at, again, the FOI cost, the storage cost, the training associated with this. You're looking at, a number of broader social issues as well, relative to privacy and the like, domestic disputes. And, again, the legislature has enacted something. They did not make it mandatory. There's still a lot that needs to be thought through with this kind of initiative.
Okay, well, we don't need to take a vote tonight unless there's anybody that chooses to do so. We're not prohibited from doing that. We can't vote on the budget, but we certainly could provide guidance back to the Board of Selectmen.
I mean, I think we should
Could-
provide the guidance at this point. Linda, are you still there?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I'm not opposed to funding it at the point where we are mandated to do so. I think in a tight budget, I'm inclined to push it off if we can.
Well, would you like me to make a
Could
motion to delete this item from CNR?
Hey, the chief wants to say one more thing.
Just the last piece that I want to mention is the chairman of the police commission wanted to go forward with the purchase of the cameras so that the town of Simsbury could set the standards for the state. His intention was to be ahead of the curve, which is about to come about.
I couldn't hear a word of that.
Yeah, the
Police commission, the chair of the police commission's intent in moving this budget item along was to set the standard for the rest of the state and be among the first
take a
to do
leadership.
so. Be in the lead.
So I haven't commented. The only thing that I'm a little nervous about on this is I feel like our role is affordability, and we've not identified anything else on any of the other capital plans that, as a board, we didn't, quote, approve of. So, I'm a little uncomfortable, and I question it, and I echo what everybody said. But as far as roles of the Board of Selectmen versus our role, picking on a particular project gives me a little pause, because I feel our role is more affordability and is that budget right than any individual project that's on the list. I feel it's their decision to prioritize that list and come forward. Having said that, I agree with that. I echo everything people are concerned about here, and I don't know what the right answer is, but I guess if you're prepared to vote tonight, we can, or we could ask them to go back and take a harder look at it and come back and tell us if you think it's still a necessary thing for this year's budget.
Well, does it help?
All right.
I agree with the oversight part. Does it help, though, if that we send them out tonight with clear instructions about funding that other position?
Yes.
Because that may help them make a decision.
Linda, did you have one more thing to add?
Yes, I think in looking at the CNR list, the reason that one jumped out at me was because of the research I've read. It happens to be an issue I've been following for some time, that showed the impact on future operating costs. I don't think replacing a highway plow truck or, a library program room technology upgrade, those kinds of things, I don't see that those have an ongoing impact on the operating budget. This one did come to me as, seemed to me to be something that was different in the sense of it having that ongoing operating cost. And I know that the chief says $6,000, but my gut is telling me it's going, based on what I've read and the articles about other municipalities having literally millions of dollars of operating costs, I just find that a little hard to believe that it's only going to be $6,000. So I would prefer that we vote on it tonight and move on.
Just one more thing to say. That $6,000 is only for the licensing fee for 1 year. You'd have to pay it the second year. I didn't know if Linda understood that piece.
Did you hear that? The chief was saying the $6,000 operating fee.
It's an annual license fee. So over the 5-year period, the capital cost here is more like $90,000 without any escalation in the license fee or any additional training or implementation. That supposedly is covered by the existing budget.
Right. I mean, anything you do with computers and so forth, as you know, well aware, you buy something and it costs you $100. By the time you're done 2 years down the road, it's $300. So that's how it goes.
We understand that.
But I can't tell you it would not happen.
So Linda, thank you for that comment, because I do think it's a little different if our objection is around operating costs and we don't think it's thought through. We have a hard time, though, if chief is telling us he believes 6,000 covers it, and that would be the annual operating cost, then, next year we may be saying find the $6,000 rather than increase your budget for it. But I think if more money comes in the police department next year, we'll be looking closely, trying to figure out, are we really putting more money in there to cover this when we didn't anticipate the cost right? So.
I just want to add one other point, which is that I think the memo talked about a 3 to 5 year lifespan of cameras. And so we'd be looking at, by the time we funded this, we're looking at replacing them anyway. And we also understand that technology will be, I think, developing in this area that will dramatically enhance, capabilities, and so our equipment will be outdated probably fairly quickly. So to the extent that we can await a mandate should it occur, even in these tight fiscal circumstances statewide as well, that just to me would be prudent. I think the best point Linda made too is Barbara picked up on that, is the distinction of having something that we're investing in today from a capital perspective that will have ongoing costs in the future. But the other element of that concerns me is the unpredictability of knowing what those added costs will be. And I think for many of the capital items, we know we can quantify reasonably what the fiscal impact will be. But relative to this item, I don't think we can. And that's perhaps even a little more frightening.
So I'm going to ask, go ahead, Linda, I'm sorry.
With the permission of the chair, I would make a motion to remove from the CNR list the purchase of body cameras.
And before I second that, or anyone else does, I have a procedural question, which is to the issue, I'm running out of meetings where I can still say I'm the new guy, but I think Barbara raises a really important question before we act on this motion, which is this within our purview as the Board of Finance to basically have a line item veto on the CNR, or is it really for us to give guidance and ask the Board of Selectmen to relook at their budget? I don't know the answer.
So to continue the conversation, since we have a motion, can I have a second first, and then I'll address your question?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, and I'll address your procedural. We definitely have the authority to take something off, there's no question. I just was a little concerned that this is the only project with the long list of capital that we've talked about. We were uncomfortable sending it back to reprioritize the capital list, but, we're not uncomfortable, and I do understand the distinction. If there's very serious concerns amongst this board about the operating cost of this, then that is completely within the purview of the Board of Finance.
Is the Board of Selectmen meeting between now and our
We do have a meeting on Monday.
meeting on Monday? So I don't know, in the interest of comedy with a T, not comedy with C-O-M-I-T-Y. One alternative as well is to make the recommendation that we'd recommend to the Board of Selectmen that they can't look on Lisa's face.
No, it is actually your budget now. We've given it to you.
Right.
So you do have the ability, you can say, okay.
That's a fair perspective.
Right.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
So Lisa says it's actually our budget now. They've recommended
Right.
a budget to us, and we approve it, I guess. Is that correct?
Right.
All right, so.
Or not.
So I guess we can meet the meetings, the police commissioner can meet up on the Board of Finance.
So we'd be happy to make a recommendation to you, but at this point, we can't change our budget. We can just recommend to you
Right,
if you want that.
very good point.
Okay, so we have a motion, and the motion was to take it out of the budget and reduce the budget by this amount of money. And we have a second. Is there any more discussion? Would anyone else like to say something?
Does it impact the other decision? And if so, how?
Well, that's why I raised, that's how this got
Right,
started.
no, I know, so I'm bringing it back because I think they need some guidance about, are we reducing the budget and now they've got to go find, then we're going to go tell them you've also got to go find the 20,000, or would we let them use the savings, that 12,000 toward?
I would let them use this.
Right.
Okay, that's, I want to make
Is
sure.
there anyone that doesn't agree with that? How about you, Linda?
I couldn't quite
The
hear.
suggestion was we would allow them to use the $12,000 reduction in the operating budget to further fund the shortage of 20,000 associated with the new position.
But
Which means now they're only
understood
short
they had
8.
already, I understood from a conversation I had with Sean a week or two ago that they already had found the 20,000.
No.
Well, you missed part of that
You missed-
discussion.
no.
Yeah, it was hard to hear, so I missed that.
Sorry.
But if everybody else is fine with it, I'll be fine with it.
Okay. So now we have a motion and a second. Is there any other comment?
No, so you're clear, Lisa?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Can you just get?
Yes.
I think
So
I-
the board is saying that there's consensus that you would be able to use that savings.
That'd be
from the-
12,000, so they need to find 8.
Right.
Okay.
So-
Just
so-
further, I mean, and that's fine. So the 8,000, we're getting to some smaller numbers here, but if the Board of Selectmen budget went up 8,000 from where it is now, there's zero impact on the mill rate, just, I mean, I know
Well-
there is an impact on the override budget, but
Yeah.
in terms of keeping the mill rate flat, we're down to the rounding error, my only point.
All right, so we still prefer
That's fine.
funds because there are a lot of pressures on the other budget.
Understood.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Opposed?
opposed?
No. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to remove that item and allow you to use that $12,000 reduction to partially fund the other position, the rest of the position. So there's still $8,000 short, and do we want to provide direction, or at this point, do we want to allow the Board of Ed to kick in the extra 8 for this year out of OPEB, since clearly we were not very clear in our directions at the last meeting?
Again, I think the important point has been made that when a new person is put on the payroll, that it's fully funded. And so next year,
Right.
that we won't have this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would therefore allow them to use the OPEB.
Correct, and any favorability in the future will not be used.
Right, when we get numbers late, we should adjust the budget for them.
Correct.
We should plan on that.
I'm okay with letting them take it from OPEB.
Okay.
Okay.
So it looks like you're done.
So can I make one last comment?
Okay, just checking.
1 minute.
After all of that.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, and this is just for the future years, but I think we really need to adopt a practice of having, for every CNR request and every capital request that isn't a simple replacement of one highway plow truck for another, that there should be an independent fiscal note from the finance director, so that we are aware of what the ongoing operating costs are, and what the future impact on budgets will be, because I think it's really important that we look both, in terms of the position that we just talked about and also in terms of capital, that we need to be aware of the downstream costs and have a whole picture of where those things are going. So that's just my 2 cents, and I think we need to really stick to that in future years.
So,
I agree.
I think that that's a terrific idea. I'm concerned about the staffing in our finance area, and I also know this year's budget, we had a surprise utilities. One of the explanations for the increase in utilities was the new truck wash we added was costing us more water. Again, we didn't identify a need for more water. We identified that that was going to be savings buying less trucks over time rather than a project that was going to cost money. So I do think that we need to understand the operating impact when things come through. We can question it, but it might be something that we ask formally for next year during the process, because I agree with Linda, it's a terrific idea to do that. I just am a little concerned that we're staffed adequately in the finance area to evaluate every one of these and the potential impacts.
You guys
But
want
that-
to increase our budget, give us a new staff in finance, we can work with that too.
But I think it's staffing aside, we saw it with the library, right? We built a library and everyone accounts for all of the physical costs. And then all of a sudden, we're hit with a huge utility charge the next year because,
Right.
we gotta turn the lights on and the heat.
Yeah.
So it happens over and over.
Well, the Ethel Walker
Yeah.
properties. When we bought
In
those, there
fact-
was no incremental cost associated with it. I asked the question, and it seems to me we now need to spend some money to figure out what we're going to do with them, so.
Yeah, and just as an addendum, sorry, am I interrupting?
No, go
No,
ahead.
you're next.
Okay, just as an addendum, and correct me if I'm misspeaking, Lisa, but I think even the $100,000 for the Veterans Memorial, there's an ongoing operating cost that
There
we're not
is.
recognizing in this coming year's budget because it probably won't be built in this year's timeframe. But, you know, in the future, I think, Lisa, did I hear it was $6,000 a year expected to maintain it?
6,000?
6,000 to maintain the
memorial?
the Veterans Memorial?
What are you
Am
going
I-
to do, wash it every week?
Am I in broad story?
I don't
thought I
think we
heard
ever
that
had a
number
number
somewhere.
on the actual
Never was
cost
a
of
number.
maintaining, but there's, without a doubt,
There always
every
is.
time you build something, you're going to have to spend some money on maintenance.
And
Right.
I would think, and I understand the pressures on finance, and I'm just wondering whether, I know everybody's tapped out, you know, in terms of the time and energy to the department, but I would think that the department that are requesting the funding, hopefully with the departments that would be responsible for providing the information to the finance director.
So can we not make it mandatory when they come forward a capital project?
They have to.
We certainly can next time around.
Yeah.
We certainly can. It would be a policy change.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would make the observation that having watched the 4+ hour meeting from last week, I don't think it's quite as tedious as being here, but
You weren't here.
I'm concerned about decisions made at the end of a 4-hour meeting, because that's really the first time that, as a Board of Finance, we actually talked about it, start to do that. So that maybe, throw this out, that we could separate the capital budgets from the operating budgets and maybe find, to have a different deadline for this. It's a radical thinking, but that we could create a different calendar for CNR and big capital projects.
In the past, we have separated out.
It just seemed like we didn't, to Barbara's point, we didn't really.
Not this time, we didn't. but-
We really haven't discussed any of those projects. I'm generally favorable on all of the ones that are in the capital budget, but,
So the calendar is prescribed by the charter.
Statute.
By the
By the
charter.
charter.
However, we have made an effort to work cooperatively with Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen that has been successful this year. And we're in a position for the first time to actually have a cash flow plan where we can look at the impact of these projects over time and we understand where it's too heavy. And I think that we shouldn't wait until next year's budget process to continue the conversation. We ought to be providing direction now as to what's the maximum size capital budget we can afford next year, and make sure that everybody understands that. And then I think that we can ask for this earlier, and we can't demand it as a board just because of the charter. But I believe that we can work cooperatively and schedule, move to put the capital earlier. Would you be amenable to
I
that?
am amenable to that.
I think it would be in everybody's best interest.
Absolutely.
Burke, would you be willing to bring that information back to the Board of Ed and the superintendent that we would like to change the timing of the capital for next year? Great. Okay, then the only other, Linda, did you have anything else before I go on?
No, thank you.
Okay, and did anyone else have anything on CNR before I go to a different topic? Okay, the only other thing I wanted to bring up was the new conversation about the potential of actually not having a flat mill rate this year, but showing an increase to fund the capital. Does anyone have any questions on that, or would they like to make any comments tonight? We're not voting till the next meeting, but I just wanted to make sure, because we haven't had a chance to really talk about that as a board, that everybody understands the issues and the calculations and what it all means.
Well, I'll start. I understand the emotional attachment to not increasing the mill rate. But I think we have a big duty here to consider what the sort of double dynamics that we have coming, which is uncertainty on revenue, certainty of certain disappearing revenue, and some big capital projects downstream, and to not take advantage of the 7% debt subscription, which, or debt reduction and it's not just debt reduction, it's actually
Debt/capital.
It's spending cash for some of the projects that we know, even though we don't need to do it this year, I think it would be responsible to do it this year. So it probably is not going to be very popular, but I think we have, we would have to have a pretty compelling reason not to raise. We're talking about $500,000 ballpark, $400,000.
Right, 434.
Yeah, 434 of an increase.
And I agree. I think if it helps smooth things out for future years, that's really what our objective is.
Mark?
No, I agree, to try to smooth things out as best we can.
Did anyone understand my argument of the 44 offsets the 42? I didn't want people to go
Yeah.
buy bigger cars.
Yeah.
I actually, I agree with Dr. Rinaldi on this.
You want a bigger car?
Yeah, don't start. I don't think we should link the two. I think our rationale for increasing the mill rate is the one that I just espoused, which is that we have uncertainty from state revenues and uncertainty from property tax revenues, and we're going to spend up to the cap to do that.
People understand that.
I think people
Because they're being put in the
understand
paper every day.
And Lisa, you said this a meeting or two ago, there is absolutely nothing wrong with somebody actually having a lower tax bill on their car. You know, I think we don't need to say it, let them figure it out. You know, I don't think we need that when you link them, it makes it sound like we're taking the $44 you're saving and we're spending it over here, right out, sort of one for the other. And it isn't directly correlated, because some people are going to be saving $100, $200, $300. The people that are saving $300 on their cars because they're $50,000 cars, it's not going to make that big a difference to them. But they will care that we raise the mill rate. So I think it's more important that we have a really good reason for why, and the reasons are very valid.
So I just want to be careful. The raising of the mill rate is to afford the capital budget. It really isn't to smooth over uncertainty. We have our reserves to help us through some of that uncertainty, but I think it's the capital budget that's presented that pushes us to say it's only responsible to start to pay for it now.
The work that needs to be done, those projects, the junior high school, the senior center, and the big money projects coming down the line. I don't know how many citizens in town are really aware of the big dollars associated with those.
I'd say I'm.
Jump in when I can.
Okay, I'm just going to, just very briefly, I am concerned when we're looking at, I think, it was $8 or $8.5 million on the senior center, $22 million for the junior high, including a new auditorium, and, some of that will be dependent, I think, on the voters' decisions as well, on whether they conclude that they want to spend $22 million, for the junior high school, to include an auditorium and what have you.
Linda, can I just add one more thing before you jump in? I think
Sure.
it's important to understand, though, the analysis that I presented again after a 4-hour meeting last week basically said that we can't afford that no matter what. Even if we start now at the 7%, it's a little heavy, $7 to $8 million. So we know we've got to cut that to begin with. The question is, where are they going to cut and how are we going to trim that? But we've got to work with them between now and then to get it down to an affordable level.
I think we all understand.
Okay. Linda, did you want to add something?
I was going to say exactly what you just said, that it isn't a question of being able to afford everything on the list, even if we do get to the 7%. that we still need to make some cuts in capital. And I think, just to reinforce that, I really think people in the public need to understand that we're talking about having to raise taxes because of this list of capital items. And that even with that, we still have to cut some of those capital items unless they want us to raise taxes even more and go above our 7% cap.
Sean, can I just ask this, how many of these projects are going to actually go in front of the voters?
Yeah, they're starred on
For
the
this year's
sheet.
capital.
They're
This
starred
year,
on the
there's
sheet.
four, right, the ones that are in the proposed public hearing, there's four, it's anything over
Here,
1%.
this is, the thing that was in the press release. Here.
Oh.
Yeah, so
I've got it right, I can read them off if you want.
Would you just?
Yep, absolutely. So the first, just going from the board of selectmen side, multi-use connections and master plan updates, trail, piece, the very first one that Jeff presented, 1.16 million. Again, that's over the 1%. The highway pavement management at $2.5 million is also over 1%. And then on the Board of Ed side, there's two projects, the Henry James Phase 2 renovation, 1.95,
Yep.
and climate control Phase 2 is just over 1% at 950.
Okay, thank you. So that's really all the voters will get a chance to have a
Will
comment
each of those
on.
be separately line itemed, or are they put
They would be
together?
questions 4 through 7.
Okay.
You basically ask, shall,
Yes.
Board of Ed, shall, Board of Selectmen, shall, debt. Not debt.
Now, the other piece to clarify, Lisa did present again tonight using this year's 1%. What we discussed at the last meeting was basically using reserves, but forcing it to go through this budget process all the way to the end. And it would basically come out of reserves, and that would be our choice on how to pay it next year, rather than approving it in advance and not having it part of the budget. And everybody understands that, right? Okay. Is there any other budget conversations that people want to have, or are you good and think you'll come to the 19th ready to vote unless we get some brand-new information from some residents that come to speak before us? Everybody good? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Just one, before you make that motion, just one quick motion to set that for the second public hearing, only because you didn't initially plan to have it, I would just feel a little more comfortable.
I'll move that we hold a second public hearing on April 19th at 5:45, place to be publicly announced.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.